welcome back to the OurSociety Experiment and this week's Making the Movement vlog. In this week's episode, we're going to talk about how we're acquiring citizen users, what kind of efforts we're making to get them on board for our free and open election campaign platform for the November 6th elections here in New Jersey, as well as some of the activism we're working on systemic reformation and alternative visions of the future. Hey everyone, how are you? This is Making the Movement on the Move. So one of the biggest challenges with running a civic tech startup, especially in the nonprofit sector, is that you want to acquire users. I mean, you really need users to have value in your platform, but especially kind of in the fledgling stage we're at right now, it's an all-volunteer organization. We haven't even sought real grant funding because we're just focused on really building our MVP and building our proof of concept with this free and open election campaign platform at beta.oursociety.org. that we've kind of have a very limited budget at this point. So we really had to kind of think outside the box about how we're going to recruit users. So we've been doing that through a number of different activities. Last week's Making the Movement vlog was all about our voter registration drive. That was one way to kind of get out to the public, say, hey, look, you have candidates in your area on the OurSociety platform. Learn about them from the convenience of your own home. This week we were involved in a event at the State House of New Jersey, sponsored by the New Jersey Policy Perspective and the Businesses for a Fair Minimum Wage organization. You can see links to both those organizations in the description below. And really what it was is kind of speaking at the State House about a $15 minimum wage. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but first I want to just kind of bookmark. So this was I'm going to show the clip of our video, but before I show the clip of our video, I'm going to give you a 2-second pause and just put the clip to the full video of the event on the screen right now. You can check it out. I'll give you 2 seconds. So now moving on, I want to just highlight the clip of the OurSociety, myself speaking at the event, and giving our perspective on why a $15 minimum wage is the right first step in a more equitable and open society.
One of the big things we focused on was our biggest asset being our people. And we knew to attract the best people, you had to pay them what they were worth. Like many business owners, we direct the future of our business based on data, historical data about what's happened to help clarify our vision of the future without bias. When it comes to $15 minimum wage, the data is clear. A recent study by the Pew Research Center showed that real wage growth has been stagnant for the past 40 years. That coincides with studies from the Economic Policy Institute tracking productivity over the last 50 years and showing that it's grown in 70%. So we have stagnant wage growth with growing productivity. The National Law Employment Project study focused on the impact of how increasing the minimum wage affects overall employment. And the data shows very clearly that the majority of times an increase in minimum wage increases the overall net employment in areas that have been implemented. So if we're going by the numbers, it would be apparent that a minimum wage increase is both necessary and deserved. But beyond the data, beyond the numbers, we should consider the broader scope of why we would support an increase in minimum wage. This increase is an incremental step in building a more equitable and open society that fosters innovation. Individuals who benefit from the receipt of these monies have more access to the tools necessary to give them the agency to transform their lives and therefore transform themselves. Raising the level of economic security is a vital project that enhances every individual's ability to experiment and innovate in all walks of life. And by raising the minimum wage, all of us gain the ability to reach higher and in different directions than previously imagined. Thank you.
Now I'm going to post a link below to the OurSociety article in our blog that we wrote, giving the detailed sources of all the information I quoted, because there was a lot of, I was making a data-driven argument. And just to kind of speak out loud about the $15 minimum wage, this is a really what we would consider here at our society a non-partisan issue. This is a data-driven issue, right? We're about a more data-driven democracy, away from partisan politics, and thinking about the transformation of society for the collective good. $15 minimum wages doesn't solve everything, right? There's a lot of other systemic problems that it won't solve. But at the end of the day, it does give more people access to more resources to transform their lives. And we know through the data, which is linked below, that the overall net gain in employment is positive. More people end up working historically, using the historical data that's available since I believe the mid-1930s. More people end up working when the minimum wage increase. More opportunities created, and it stimulates the economy. Now, the argument against the $15 minimum wage that some people have proposed is kind of twofold. That it'll increase, it'll lead to inflation. I think there's a general fallacy in that argument, because by saying that increasing minimum wage will lead to inflation because it increases costs across the board, I mean, that may be true. There certainly may be cost increases at some extent, but to argue that they be raised across the board, for example, I was having a conversation on social media with people about a pizza shop. To argue that the cost of all the ingredients, the cheese, the pepperoni, the bread, the dough, etc., is going to raise across the board is a fallacy, because it assumes that every manufacturer is employing minimum wage workers at the lowest amount possible, or at least below $15. Now, while some that may be true, I would imagine that many major food manufacturers have a highly automated process, both with machinery and robotics, in terms of developing their products. So I think it's kind of a really baseless argument to jump and say minimum wage increase is going to lead to inflation, because there's nothing to tell us that is true, right? It's a possibility, sure. That, of course, it's a possibility. Just like not having increasing inflation is a possibility. So until but the difference, right, is we have a lot of data to say that, well, overall the net gain in employment is better. Now, this kind of brings up a new and kind of really interesting concept that we kind of have to explore, because then you get the challenge that, this is harmful for small business. And to that point, I can understand. But I think the challenge is, if that's the kind of stance we're going to take, that stance is not cooperative. It does not jive with capitalism. So if we want a society where we protect the individual, we protect their rights and their ability to work and have gainful employment, then we need systemic alternatives. Because in the purely dogmatic capitalist system that we subscribe to, under a single regime of market, not exploring alternative regimes, then this is exactly what capitalism is supposed to do. Capitalism, in theory, in the entire basis of capitalism, is an ever-expanding economic machine. So there comes a certain point in time when the inequalities grow too large, which, wealth inequality in the U.S. is the highest it's ever been. And more importantly, it's the wealth inequality in the U.S. I shouldn't say it's the highest it's ever been. It's certainly, over the last 40 years, it's the highest it's ever been. Since the 70s, there's been a significant transfer of wealth through every administration, regardless of policy. And this is in a great book called Winner Take All Politics. I'll also link to that below. So anyway, going back to the point, is in capitalism there are winners and losers, and that's part of the system. Now, I want to make it clear, I'm not arguing pro-capitalism, but I am saying that if your issue is with the minimum wage raise, if your issue is that it'll put small businesses out of business, well, capitalism is not about protecting businesses, right? So, and we can't have, if we develop theories and policy around protecting businesses within the capitalist market economy, the dogmatic capitalist view of how we operate society, well, those two things are incompatible. They're just fundamentally at odds with each other, and you're really humanizing the efforts of the system. So instead of making the policy change to actually change the system, instead of making efforts to try and rearrange the institutions within society, we humanize it. We humanize a bad system. So to argue against protecting small businesses is a humanization of the capitalist system at its core, and they're just not compatible. Doesn't mean I don't support small businesses. I'm a small business owner. I understand how the struggle is. I understand the grind. It's real. running a small business is a really challenging thing, and it has moderate rewards, especially even at a moderately successful level. So it is a challenge, but those are two different arguments. And I think it's important that we understand that businesses must adapt. That's part of the capitalist system. And if we don't want them to adapt, if we want small businesses, which I am a big favor of, I think the future of employment is a combination of small businesses and cooperative firms, then we need to kind of reimagine society at its base level. Maybe start thinking about a vital suite of protections for every individual to allow them to experiment and to allow them to kind of work for less if they wanted to and operate more leanly, because there is a suite of vital protections on the bottom. So that is our efforts in terms of this outreach. And these kind of events are really important, again, to kind of bring in citizen users, because we do have such a low budget. Anything we can do to kind of get our name out there and show people that we are an organization focused on transforming the institutions, right? Systemic alternatives. And we believe that in order to do that, you have to kind of attack the problem from multi-angles. Our society is our product. It is something we've built for people. I mean, it's I call it a product, but it's really just a service, a platform that we've built to kind of help facilitate this change, to open up access to local leadership positions to any alternative thinker, anyone with alternative vision, by removing the financial barriers to access. But this is just one step in a much larger vision. So we hope that these kind of events draw more people to the OurSociety Experiment, draw more people to the OurSociety vision of systemic alternatives, right? Institutional reformation, and kind of give us the ability to kind of conceptualize society outside of the current regime of thought, outside of the existing laws. Understand that they are not natural, they are not necessary, but they're made by people just like you and I. And we can change them. Anything made can be unmade, and anything we imagine can be made. That is the beauty of society. That's the beauty of democracy. It really is limited only by our imagination. And right now, I think we suffer from a real failure of imagination. So on that note, I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks so much for tuning into this kind of brain space here at the OurSociety Experiment and our efforts, our daily vlog. We'll see you guys next week.